found our two co-founders at Boosted Commerce through a headhunter, talked with them and really fell in love with the idea. In particular, as we think about this role, I am our head of M&A. There's not too many startups where you have the ability to grow inorganically, in addition to the organic growth, and kind of use my investing acumen within a startup spot. So was super excited about the role. The company was started about a year ago. I joined shortly thereafter, and we've been rocking and rolling ever since.
Awesome. So if you could, give people kind of a macro view on, kind of the process, like say there's a seller like, hey, I just hit 7 figures. I want to sell my business. What's that process look like in terms of approaching you guys?
Yeah, so we see businesses from all different types of angles, all different types of places. There's obviously brokers out there in the space, and brokers certainly have their place within the Amazon ecosystem, and we'll see deals from them. But we also have people reaching out to us directly, and us doing some outbound, research as well. So really, all three of those tools are different ways to get in contact with us. We have emails, acquisition@boosted.com. You can go to our website, boostedcommerce.com. There's some free file forms to fill out in terms of some overview on your business so we can get an understanding. From there, we'll typically have a very short introduction call to make sure the business fits with us, then probably one more deeper call to really dive in, ask for some data requests. Pretty quickly after that, we will provide you with an indication of what we think your business, the value of your business. If it makes sense and both sides get to an agreement, from there, it's a 30 to 45 day-ish period of diving in a lot deeper on due diligence, making sure we really understand the business. So when we transition, there's no issues, no concerns, and it kind of continues with the stability and the growth that you have. Part of that is legal documentation. And then after that 45 days, you transfer the business to us, we transfer you the money. There's usually a short period where we kind of have a transition in terms of you helping us continue to run the business to make sure we fully understand it. And then you're sitting on the beach drinking a margarita while we're working for you and making you some more money.
So, so in terms, it sounds like you, as part of the deal, the original owner keeps some percentage of the business. Is that correct? They get to retain some equity. Is that a discussion? Like, how does that kind of work?
Yeah, it's usually not equity. What we have is an earnout, right? So it's actually limits the downside as the further seller doesn't actually have to put any more money in the business, even if anything were to happen, but participates in the upside. So assuming we continue to grow the business, like I said, we're working for you guys for a little bit, you being the seller, as you'll continue to earn money as we earn money as well.
Interesting. So, give me, going back to my example. So I come to you, I've got $1 million, 7-figure Amazon business. Say I'm netting 30%. And I come to you and say, hey, I want to, sell my business. I know the terms are going to be different. So this isn't, I'm going to preempt this with don't expect this, for every business, guys, but just an overall example, what would the equity payout kind of look like? Is there, what's the average multiple, kind of things like that?
Yeah, there's obviously a lot more than just margins and size, right? We have kind of a criteria we go through, including what industry are you in? What does the competitive landscape look like? Are you a leader in the category? Do you have a review mode? How long have you been there in terms of history associated with the business? What does your product diversification or concentration look like? What is your mix of organic versus inorganic growth, and how much PPC are you spending? Just to name a few. There's a bunch of different aspects that go into it, so it's tough to give an exact number. What we're typically seeing at the moment is multiples kind of in the 3 to mid 4 range for most businesses of that size. Those tick up a little bit, and that's kind of a combination of cash up front, the earnout component, which we just talked about, and then the third component is usually either a seller note where the seller provides, quote unquote, debt to the business in order to continue to push forward, or what we call a stability payment, where given some of the COVID bump, what we'll say is, hey, we want to give you credit for all of that growth, but we also want to make sure that the growth maintains, right? So if you can even just keep it flat, we don't need to grow the business for that stability, but just keep it flat. we'll pay you for, the size of the business with an extra X amount or X percent of the overall purchase price.
Awesome. So I assume that, you probably get quite a few businesses coming through the door. You probably, take on some, don't take on others. What I'm curious though, without, giving away any client's info, which I know you would never do, what are maybe like three things that you are maybe in common that you see in businesses that are really strong and successful, and maybe three that, that you see a lot of, maybe the three biggest mistakes or three biggest issues that you see from companies that, are maybe not the best fit for you guys, or just not being super successful with Amazon?
Sure. It's all dependent, right? I think every buyer has something different that they look for. One thing that we are typically looking for, excuse me, is a sorry about that. Is
No
a
worries.
hero SKU. So we're looking for one kind of, or a couple that really drive the business, right? So when we look at our business model, we're looking to put together a portfolio of different businesses. And at that size, if you have a hero SKU, it's a little bit easier for us to grow, to understand, to operate, right? If you have 100 SKUs doing $1 million, a little bit harder to understand how that works. Where if you have 4 SKUs and 3 of them are doing 900 of that $1 million, and we can really understand those SKUs, we can understand where they are and help. So our diversification typically comes across the portfolio, where we're looking for a little bit more concentration at a deal that size, right? As we scale up, it becomes a little bit different. But that's one thing that we're certainly looking for. The other thing, which I think is very important, is rankings and reviews, right? We like to call it a review mode. How do you stand out versus your competition? It's not anything that's that new or that crazy, but if you're showing up in the top 5 on certain keywords within your category, that Fifth Avenue real estate is obviously worth a lot more than showing up on the second page where most people aren't scrolling there. So how do you get to the first page, and how do you maintain that? It's quite hard to get up there, but once you're up there, it's actually a lot easier to stay there, given the cycle of Amazon, and kind of getting into that natural cycle. So those are 2 things that we're always looking at. The third one, I think, would be margins. As we kind of look at businesses, we typically like to see businesses of 20% plus margins. Obviously, again, depends on the category. As you go into supplements, those get even higher. There's others that are kind of closer to teens, make sense. But having, if you're putting $1 of revenue into Amazon, and Amazon's taking a decent amount because of their FBA fees and their marketplace fee, et cetera, you want a little bit of wiggle room, so you're not, doing all this work to get pennies on a dollar on the end, and then there's not a lot of room if something goes wrong on that margin. So 20% margins is kind of our baseline. For the right companies, we'll look at changing that around. But those are 3 things in particular to think about from a very high level. On the other side of things, there's 2 kind of things that really stand out. One is stockouts, right? I think stockouts, everybody has them, in particular in times like 2020, when you're growing like a weed and you have no idea how to forecast, because your forecast from last month has been quadrupled or quintupled. But having stockouts are pluses and minuses, right? When we look at a business, it's a plus in that, okay, if that stockout wasn't there, it actually lives us some additional room and upside. On the minus, when things do stock out, your ranking can go down pretty quickly, because as I mentioned, it's easy to stay in that top 5. So you have people gunning for that top 5, and we'll take over your spot fairly fast. And then what we have at Boosted is called the return to glory SOP, and ways that you have to kind of get back up to the top when that happens. Associated with that is also delistings, right? And some delistings you can't help, and that's the nature of Amazon. Some of them you're going to have some black hat activities where people will attack you. But having ways to minimize delistings and having SOPs to get it back up as quickly as possible is huge, because that, the 2 ways you're not going to sell on Amazon are stockouts and delistings. So that's, those are 2 things where we see them in the numbers. Obviously, people want to buy growing businesses, people want to buy profitable businesses, and those are a couple things that overall are fairly common.
Yeah. I just from my own experience, I've been doing this since 2012, and I was one of those people who scaled quickly, and at one point we were up over 800 SKUs. And in retrospect, one of the biggest mistakes we made was doing that. Right? If we would have just stayed really tight in terms of maybe 10 to 20 SKUs. That would have been, I think a lot easier to manage, right? The more SKUs you add, the harder it is to manage. A lot of people don't realize that. So, scaling quick's a great thing, but, unless you have, stuff in place to be able to manage that kind of growth, it's actually going to be a detriment in a lot of ways. I'm curious to know, how important is brand to you? So if somebody comes to you, and they're not really well known, but they're doing a ton of business on Amazon, which is actually kind of common these days. Do you care if they have a really strong brand outside of Amazon, or is it all, you're just looking at the numbers for the most part?
It's somewhere in between there, to tell you the truth, right? So we are building up a portfolio of businesses, as I mentioned before. Not every single product we're going to buy or brand we're going to buy, we're expecting to take off of Amazon, right? There are some products that are meant to be on Amazon as well. There's other products where we're looking at it and there's brand potential beyond, right? Ultimately, we want to be where the consumer is. Right now, obviously, Amazon is that spot, doing 50% of e-commerce business, and e-commerce business continues to grow at a tremendous pace, which was only accelerated by COVID. But where else are consumers going, right? Walmart is on its way up, so that's a super interesting opportunity. Shopify has grown in an enormous way over the last few years, and it used to be WooCommerce, and now everybody's talking about Shopify, right? But having your own DTC site, but not every brand's meant to have a DTC site. So it all kind of plays into valuation, how we underwrite a business, what we're thinking about. There are certainly businesses on Amazon where if you have that review mode, you're up at number one. Most people on Amazon, I think the last stat I saw was 80% are searching for a product. They're not searching for a brand name, right? So if you're searching for soap, you're going in to search for soap. You're not searching Dove. So from that perspective, Amazon is not as important as either having a brand for a DTC perspective. But you still want, I think that goes into review mode and what kind of reviews you have. And that in itself is almost a branding on Amazon, right? Because there's not too many places outside of marketplace where all of your competitors are lined up and you have 27 straight pages of soap. How are you going to stand out there, right? Brand name is one. If that's not going to work, you need to be at the top of the rankings and you need to have reviews. So somebody's going to come and say, okay, this has been validated by the Amazon community, the Amazon ecosystem. And that's part of why Amazon gets the fees they do for having the billions of eyeballs that can see your product.
Right. So I'm really interested in the overall opportunity. What your background is in finance, right? It's not necessarily in the e-commerce space as far as being a seller. And I'm curious what you think about the opportunity to quickly grow and sell a company in e-commerce today. Do you think that, despite the 3,800 new sellers coming in every day, what is it, 85 or something percentage failure rate that Jeff Bezos admitted in front of Congress, what do you think about the opportunity? Are you still seeing some massive, beautiful exits? Are you still seeing people really scale quickly? And do you think it's still just a really great opportunity? Or is it kind of equalized for as compared to other income streams and opportunities?
Yeah, I can qualify that from both a buyer and a seller perspective, right? So my background, while in investing, I've been doing consumer investing for a long time, traditionally more brick and mortar, and have kind of moved towards e-commerce. What Amazon has been able to do for mom and pop sellers is beyond incredible, right? We talk to sellers all day long. We've probably talked to over 1,000 in the last year, or seen 1,000 businesses. And people have told us they learn from YouTube, or they learn from blogs just like this, or channels, and that's incredible to me. That used to not be the case. And why is that why are you able to do that? Because as a one-person show, you can now create a multi-million-dollar business fairly easily with the infrastructure that Amazon set up. So the opportunity is tremendous. There's never really been a better time to be a e-commerce seller. There's more and more people doing it, but there's also more and more opportunity as everything moves that way. You have, aggregators or investors similar to Boosted Commerce who are looking for ways to roll this up and are paying a nice, multiple to be able to get things where there is a product market fit already. And from the seller perspective, there's certainly sellers who love starting new things and don't want to deal with the hassle of scaling it to the next level, or don't know how, or just have plugged all their money back into working capital. Once you've kind of reached that level now, there's a tremendous payday on the back end, right? So yes, there is a decent fail rate that you just mentioned, Amy, but there's also a tremendous opportunity, and there's not really many other places where you can work, some people as little as 3 to 4 hours a week, build up $1 million+ business, really just kind of finding a nice product market fit, bringing it to Amazon and getting your goods into a FBA warehouse. And then, a little bit of marketing and you're right there. It's fascinating what Amazon's been able to do and other marketplaces have been able to do for mom and pop businesses.
Yeah, I love that perspective. It is still a great opportunity. And when you compare it to what you would have to do traditionally to grow a business of that size in that time frame and the team that you would need, there's a big difference there. So I would agree on that side of the opportunity, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about business value. Everyone wants to know, well, okay, for example, we run a lot of our expenses through our Amazon business. It's kind of nice, right? We can write off like our some of our house stuff because our office is in the house. We can write off our truck payment because we use that, to move stuff around, that kind of stuff. So a lot of people do that. They'll run their personal expenses through their business, that kind of thing. Business expenses, of course. But either way, let's talk about how a business's value for an Amazon type of business is calculated, because not all of those expenses are taken out of that margin that you talked about. And you talked about a 20% margin. Are we talking about before advertising, after advertising, or is that what you're looking for them to net? So can we talk a little bit about how a business is valued and what sellers should be looking for when they're looking at their books with their accountant and what they should be thinking about?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say is at Boosted Commerce, we have expertise in digging into any type of financial set we get, right? So we can take your numbers directly off Amazon and use those to kind of create our own P&L. We can even just give us your data and we'll figure out how to put it together, which is great. That being said, not only from a selling perspective, but just general business practices, having your numbers in working order makes everything so much easier, both from an analytics perspective, but also just managing your business, right? So it's worthwhile to get that set up. When we think about it, we're looking at what we call either SDE, seller's discretionary earnings, or as it gets bigger, it's EBITDA. And both of those are essentially a proxy for cash flow or profit, right? How much money is your business making on any given time period? Now, what we're looking is for recurring profit. So as you're talking about, Amy, in terms of office space, or you're putting your own car through it because it's a business expense where you're traveling all over, those are what we call add backs. So if you look at your number and then there's some costs that as a Boosted Commerce or another aggregator or another buyer, those aren't going to be continued costs. You'll get credit added those back to your numbers. So that will actually make your profit a little bit higher than your actual profit, because what we care about is future cash flows, right? We're looking at what can we make on this business, and we don't have a car. We already have our office. We even sometimes have, if you're looking at a Jungle Scout or some costs like that, which aren't as large, but we can add those back to give you credit, because we're looking at what we're going to be doing. So when I say 20% margins, I'm talking about that adjusted seller's discretionary earnings, or EBITDA, which is for every dollar that you make in revenue, you're getting 20 cents of quote unquote cash flow.
Got it. That makes sense. So In terms of selling though, and in terms of seller fees, I know there are many different types of buyers. We have aggregators, we have individual buyers. You can post your business on business websites like Empire Flippers. There's many different types of businesses out there, and types of buyers out there. So in terms of that, like how would you compare Boosted, if we can explain a little bit about what type of buyer Boosted is, and kind of compare that to some of the other types of buyers out there, and then talk about how much it costs to sell. There's obviously going to be some fees or something like that associated with that sale. Can we talk about that?
Sure. So the industry is changing at a dramatic pace, right? From a buyer's perspective, it kind of reminds me of private equity back in the 1980s, and this is getting off of Amazon speak, but back then the industry was incredibly nascent, as it is here, but there's still a decent amount of infrastructure in place. So it's just evolving at a rapid pace, which is only made more rapid by what's happened with COVID over the last year. So from that perspective, you typically, Amazon wasn't set up for buying and selling companies, but it's kind of evolved from the aspect of people like Boosted Commerce coming in. So you have multiple different aggregators who have raised a decent amount of money to come in and buy up businesses and add scale. And when I say that, right, what we always tell our sellers is, okay, they say, shoot, I wish I would have had an additional 15 hours this week to do X, Y, Z. Well, we have a team of operators behind us who, once we buy the business, we can actually give that additional TLC to your business to help scale it, right? Not only the time, but also expertise, because we have, the boosted brain is what we call it. So we have a team that sits kind of at corporate, and we have a supply chain team, and we have an inventory management team, and we have a marketing team that all allows us to spread it across multiple different businesses, whereas one business, it's harder to have all that infrastructure in place. So that's kind of where the aggregator model comes from. Boosted Commerce, we like to think of ourselves more than just an aggregator, right? We're trying to be where the consumer is. So how do we take that and scale? That's a different question. So that's kind of one set of buyers, and typically those buyers can pay a little bit more than others who are buying on a one-off basis, because they can drive more value out of your business, right? Because of that team they have, there's additional growth that they have, there's additional levers, potentially even moving it off Amazon or into Europe because we have expertise there, et cetera. You have individual buyers, right, which have been around for a while, who can go buy businesses, and are kind of just continuing on with the mom and pop way, who will take your business and continue to run in a similar manner, but are looking again for that product market fit, so they don't have to start something from scratch and get through that point you were talking about earlier, Amy, where a certain percentage of businesses aren't going to make it to $1 million. I know the numbers you were throwing out earlier. The number we see is there's somewhere between 40 and 50,000 businesses on Amazon doing over $1 million of revenue, right? So it's still a decent size, but it's not that easy to get to that size. So some people are looking to buy their way in, even as an individual. And then what you also have seen is Amazon businesses continue to get larger. Some of the private equity type investors are also coming into the space, in particular for larger ones, right? So we're not now talking about $1 million of revenue. We're talking about 8 or even 9 figures of revenue, $100 million, where Amazon has attracted a lot of attention recently, given some of the success and given how well the business has done. So those are kind of the 3 main buyers we're seeing. There's different aspects to each, and there's different benefits and different issues with each. What we're trying to do is build up a portfolio of 100 plus, 200 plus brands, become the Johnson & Johnson or Procter & Gamble of the 21st century, have an opportunity to have all these brands and benefit from the boosted brain while maintaining the integrity of the brands themselves and hopefully helping them scale.
Cool. Makes sense. I would love to get your experience and opinion on some of the barriers that you've seen that businesses have had to selling. So they go to sell. What are some of the barriers that are in place that prevent them maybe from getting the money that they wanted to, or from selling at all?
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about it earlier. there's a bunch of different types of sellers, right? Most of the buyers are looking for private label businesses rather than resellers. That's not to mean that if you're a reseller, you can't sell your business, but we're, going back to your question on brand, Andy, we are looking for businesses that have some type of brand, even if it's not, a very well recognized brand, at least having their own products that they're selling rather than reselling other people's products. It gives a little bit of a moat. You have, we typically won't buy businesses that don't have a trademark associated with the brand as well, because that gives you that IP, the intellectual property associated with it. So that's one thing that does pop up. I just mentioned a second, which is not having the trademark. Even if you are branded, if you don't have that trademark, somebody can either copy your business pretty easily, or they might already have a trademark and you might be infringing on somebody else's intellectual property. Brand registry also is a huge part of selling on Amazon. You can't get onto brand registry without a trademark. So that is another kind of thing that prevents people from being able to sell. As you think about the rest of it, right, there's different issues we've run into across the board. Inventory is always a big one, right? It goes back to stockouts. What does your supply chain look like? How quickly can you get goods in? And when we buy a business, we're hoping to grow it from day one, right? So if your inventory is not in a great perspective, it might, at the very least, delay the transaction so you can get your inventory into place. We've seen businesses where we're going through the numbers that they've provided to us, and they say it's $500,000 of EBITDA, for example, and we dig into the numbers and it's actually $300,000 of EBITDA. And that's a very difficult thing for us to digest and understand. Because it kind of throws away from the trust of what, what we're buying and what else don't we know. And B, tells us you don't really have a good grip on your business. So as I talked about earlier, if you don't know your numbers, that's fine. We'll help you dig into them. But if you tell us your numbers are X and they're actually a lot less than X, it becomes a little bit harder from that perspective. We'll still try to find ways to close those deals. But ultimately, right, we're relying, because it's such a fast process, on what the seller's telling us, and having that kind of relationship, that trust in particular, as sellers will be continuing to earn money with us through that earnout period. We really care about kind of having that strong relationship and trust across both between buyer and seller.
Got it. And then as far as you mentioned some of the types of products, so this is always a big, debate of that you should have a trademark, but you should also have kind of recognized products that are a little bit different. So let's say I'm a really good marketer and I've built, I've paid for a bunch of reviews and I've built a brand, and, I'm at the top of page one, but my margins maybe aren't so good and my products are really easy to copy. Is that going to be a barrier to me being able to sell? Or because, hey, I'm selling a lot of volume and I've done a good job of getting to page one, is it going to be okay?
Yeah. I don't think it's a barrier to sell. I think it all comes down to valuation, right? So it depends on where you are. If you're at the top of page one and doing 20% margins and in a category where you are dominating, you'll probably get a higher valuation than somebody who's at the top of page one who has lower margins, who might, what we call muddled, right? Where somebody can come in and take market share by lowering the price, et cetera. That being said, as I talked about earlier, right, there's a lot of recognition and clout and value given to being at the top of page one on any given keyword. So just to say, for example, if you're, I don't know, the number one, what's a good kind of generic product, right? If you're the
water bottle, that's Andy and I's favorite one.
Great one.
You're the number one water bottle. Can you sell your business?
Water bottle. There's not going to be that much innovation in water bottles, right? So how can you maintain your number one spot, and how do you kind of think about that? As long as you've got the marketing down, I think a bit of a higher margin is probably going to be helpful. And sometimes you are in a race to the bottom, right? Sometimes we are looking and saying, okay, if you're the lowest priced already and you're 25% margins, that's great. Alternatively, if you're the number one and you're priced above people and been able to maintain that also looks good, right? Some people don't want to be the highest price, but sometimes price is an indicator of value. So you can be priced above your competitors and be in good shape, as long as them coming down further in price hasn't devalued your business, right? You're still number one at 40 and your competitors at 20. That kind of shows some of that. Even though it's a water bottle, it shows you have a moat around your product.
Got it. And then I guess my big thing that I'd like to know is, what can sellers do now? So now they kind of know how their business is valued. They know that there's many different ways they can sell. There's many different types of buyers. They know what's important as far as their net margin, where that needs to be, 20%. They know what kind of products they should have. They should focus on a smaller number of products instead of having a lot of products across multiple categories. And so they know all those things. But that being said, what would you say are the top maybe 3 most important things we can focus on if we're wanting to sell our brand? Like, let's say I want to sell next year. What should I be focused on this year to make it really, really an awesome deal?
Yeah, we actually often appreciate a brand that isn't fully efficient. And by that, I mean, there's some low-hanging fruit opportunities for us to take and continue to grow the brand, right? So it's not necessarily you need to have everything buttoned up. Nobody ever has. There's hair on every business, right? And there's hair on boosted commerce. Every business has something that is not perfect. So understanding that story and kind of what's going on there, I think, is number one. And then number 2 is knowing where that growth opportunity is, right? If your business is down 20%, it's obviously gonna be a little bit harder to sell. So you can't, not think about top line. But if your business is growing by 10, 15%, and there's an ability to grow it by 30%, and you've started to prove that, that's not a bad time to sell, because you can say, okay, here's how I would do this over the next year. And then boosted commerce can come in and say, great, not only can we grow that extra 20%, but with our expertise and with our team and our knowledge and our time commitment, we can take that 20% and move it to 40%. So that's one thing I do want to stress. Like, if you're waiting for that perfect time to sell your business where everything's buttoned up, it's never going to be, right? And you're never going to sell. And it's not a bad time at all right now to be looking to sell your business, because there's a decent amount of people, attracted to the space, and the multiples are pretty nice for somebody who's got a nice business ready to go. So, as you think about getting it ready, I would focus on, where are the opportunities? What is the hair in your business, and how can you mitigate that hair, right? It doesn't have to be fully figured out, but what are the reasons it's there, and what's the story you can tell around it? And then it's not going to make or break it, but again, having your financials and understanding what they are, I can't stress, like, it is, we can do it, but it's helpful for you as a seller to be able to understand what you're selling also, and how much money you're making, right? It's amazing. People get a check in their bank account every week, or every 2 weeks from Amazon, and kind of say, okay, great, but don't really fully appreciate, right, that how much is going out to marketing, or how much is that, and your profitability can vary pretty widely from that perspective.
Awesome. Excuse me. We all got the coffees today. Adam, I'm interested in, are there any categories that you guys won't invest in, right? So say I live in Southern California, kind of near you, I'm really big into the adult industry. I've got my line of adults toys that I sell on Amazon. It's going gangbusters. I have this thing that I came up with that is just the most innovative adult toy ever. It's flying off the shelves. If we come to you guys, are you going to be interested in that, or do you guys steer away from any categories?
We do steer away from categories. I apologize, my Slack's going crazy, so I've been trying to turn it off for the last 20 minutes.
No worries.
I finally figured it out. But that wouldn't scare us away, right? We actually, Andy, to your point, we have a thesis around what we call embarrassing product Inc. So we're okay with some products. Now sexual wellness does become a bit difficult on Amazon, because some of them you can't actually show up in the keywords, and there's restrictions. But the ones that I wouldn't say there's any category that's an absolute no, we'll never look at it. The ones that are a bit more difficult for us are fashion and electronics. And probably for a few of the reasons we've already talked about, right? On the fashion side, if you have one pair of women's leggings, that one pair between small, medium, large, extra large, and 5 colors, and all of a sudden you're at 20 ASINs very fast, right? So that kind of adds up on the ASIN side of things. And then the other side of things is innovation, right? We talked about water bottles aren't going to be innovated on very often, but electronics, the iPhone charger is a great example, where from 7 to 8 to 9 to 10, you need 4 different chargers, and they're moving pretty fast. And that makes it a lot harder to stay at that Fifth Avenue real estate on Amazon if your product is going to become obsolete fairly quickly. So those are two things that we kind of look at as we think about categories. But I don't think there's anything where we would say not even willing to kind of at least dig in on level one.
Right. I'm curious, are you guys only doing Amazon businesses, or do you also look at, standalone e-com businesses that maybe they built a business on their own? Or what about print on demand? Are you doing any, KDP stuff? Do you do any of the, I forget what it's called, but where you print your own t-shirts on Amazon? Some people have built some pretty massive businesses in both of those marketplaces. Are those something that you guys dig into, or is it strictly Amazon third-party seller setup?
At the moment, we are predominantly focused on third parties, right? As I talked about a little bit earlier, when we think about where we're going, we want to be where the consumer is. So what does that mean? Most of our businesses are 80 to 90% Amazon right now, but that is declining as we think about DTC, as we think about other marketplaces, as we think about, even potentially brick and mortar. One of our two co-founders was the founder of Charming Charlie. So he has those brick and mortar relationships and knows all the malls, and we're in discussions constantly in terms of, what does it look like and when's the right time? Obviously, brick and mortar is almost a faux pas at the moment given COVID, but I think there is opportunity if you have the right deals in place. So we will look at them. I would say, up the middle of our fairway right now is 70% plus on Amazon. We'll look at DTC, Shopify businesses. We'll also look at kind of affiliate marketing businesses, right? So as we think about where Amazon's going, Amazon does give a lot of credit in their algorithm to driving traffic to Amazon. So how can you do that, and how do you bring more attention to the Amazon space? We have beauty brands where we'll look at a beauty affiliate marketing website that has backlinks, et cetera. So as we kind of build out our categories, certainly thinking about how we drive traffic to Amazon into our brands from the outside world.
That brings up a really good point, and a lot of Amazon sellers don't do this in terms of value add, right? Like if you maybe came up with some kind of proprietary software that you use in your own business that is a huge value add when they can hand it off to you guys and say, hey, we've automated X, Y, and Z. We've got this Facebook group of 100,000 people in the brands. We've got all these influencers that we have relationships. So I assume that you guys take all these kind of extra things that the brand has done. And take that into consideration in terms of having some kind of like back end machine to really push the awareness and the sales of the products.
100%, and that's part of what all those Slacks I was just getting were about. Was how we do that better. So it's funny you mentioned that right now, but that's something we're always thinking about, right? It's amazing to me. There's a bunch of sellers we talk to who are like, oh yeah, we have a 10,000 person database that we have not emailed once, or that we haven't been able to really monetize. It's a huge opportunity. When I talk about low hanging fruit, that's one thing we're always looking at is how do we engage with the consumer? Now it's obviously a lot harder on Amazon because Amazon's customers are their customers. But as you think about DTC and you think about other channels, how can we use that information and get to, again, what we're trying to do is be where the consumer is. So if you have that consumer data and they're a fan of your brand, how can you get back to them? Right. And retention, repeat rates is something we look at all the time. It depends on the product and the category, but we spend a lot of time thinking about repeat customers.
So another thing that a lot of people, I just got approached by a fairly big brand that wants us to take a look at their account. And one of the things that, he had mentioned, which, I knew this, but I didn't realize how much more in terms of valuation that you can get is subscribe and save, right? Like if you have a massive amount of people on subscribe and save, if you have some type of, like I always say that consumables are the holy grail, especially on Amazon, right? If you sell a consumable product, as terrible as some of it is for the earth, unfortunately. But a consumable product is the holy grail, right? Because that's like, it's like a product subscription, right? Like it runs out, people need to order more. I assume that you guys also really love those types of businesses and also bump value if they have a lot of subscribe and save in place.
For sure. It does depend on, there's more than just subscribe and save, right? So from a consumable perspective, absolutely. We have beauty businesses that some other people don't really look at the same way as we do, but we think about, again, being where the consumer is, a lot of beauty businesses have an opportunity to grow beyond Amazon. But retention, repeat, that all kind of goes into subscribe and save also, right? So what is that recurring revenue base? If you have a consumer that you don't need to market to, that is coming back on a monthly basis, that consumer is worth a lot more than somebody who's coming once, and you can also, your ACoS can go up, your cost of advertising can go up on all of that, because they're coming back, and that second buy is pure profit, right? So when that's one thing I think a lot of people, particularly for repeat businesses, don't spend enough time on, is they say, oh, my ACoS is high when it's 50, 60%. But okay, if that consumer is coming back twice or even 3 times, that ACoS goes down to 20%. So that's another thing kind of to take into account as you think about your business.
Yeah, ACoS is a funny number because there's so many people who don't realize, they look at a high, like a 60% ACoS, especially in the beginning when you're first launching things like that. Like, oh, it's absolutely horrible. And they don't realize that that's a long game, right? In terms of like brand awareness, and exactly like you said, if you have a product that people are going to order more than once, then, you can take that ACoS and start subtracting, because that long game is where it's at. I'm curious to know, you said like length of the time the business, has been running. So I assume that you really, what's like a minimum amount of time that you would want a business to be up and operating and, see month over month growth before you would consider it? If somebody like, launches something and it just goes hockey stick on the first month, is that something that you guys are going to be interested in? Or, is it something that you would kind of hang back and watch for a few months to make sure that, it's not just some like fad or, like the solar glasses, something like that?
No, we talk about it all the time. And typically we're looking for at least 2 years of history, right? I think the minimum we'll go to is like 18 months. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Andy, right? Is any business can have a great month or two. But we're trying to build a long-term sustainable business. And what does that look like? It's hard to see that over 2-month trend, even 3-month trend, even a year, right? Because it's seasonality of a lot of these businesses on Amazon. So we typically look at both month over month and year over year, trying to figure out what's going on there. Understanding not only industry trends, but competitors' trends also, right? Is your business going up because one of your competitors was delisted or out of stock, right? And that could show a nice pickup, which you may not see if you're kind of looking across the industry and not understanding what's going on outside of your individual business. So that is, a very important part of our diligence process, is not only what is the business doing now, but what has it done historically, and how do those trends look.
Awesome. I assume that, you're, how am I going to phrase this question? You probably see a lot of businesses with a lot of different processes in place, right? I would love to know what you've seen in terms of processes, what people are using to build those processes. Are they all in like Excel spreadsheets? Are they in Airtable? I'm sure they're in all different kinds, but I'm wondering if there's some kind of basis that people can use besides, the standard screen grab and maybe the Google Sheets, any advice you can give in building out these processes. So when people come to you, you go, oh, wow, you guys got some great stuff in place.
Yeah, I would say whatever works for you and helps you manage your business is more important than having that set up for a seller or for a buyer, excuse me, right? Because most buyers will have their own processes in place, right? We have our own inventory management system. We have our own financial system. We have our own way we forecast, supply chain. So seeing how you do it or a seller does it is super helpful. But at the end of the day, we learn a ton from our sellers. And it's very important, but what we care more about is understanding your business and being able to kind of understand trends and how it's managed, right? So most important is figuring out what works for you and following it, right? We know people who have 1, 2 ASIN businesses who are using Amazon's inventory replenishment, and that works perfectly for them. And then we know other people are using complex models where the forecasting is something that I don't even understand until I talk to them. And, that works for them. It's business dependent, and it's really ultimately what's going to help you grow. Right now, if there's processes that we can learn from, we might add some additional value, but that more comes to what you were saying earlier, right? Which is more around mailing lists or kind of some IP or something that's been built out rather than just management, right? If there's a proprietary system that can be helpful, that certainly adds value.
Awesome. The other thing I'm really curious about is like, one of my coaches always asks, like, what would somebody change about your business if they were to buy it today, right? It's a good self-reflection in terms of taking a step back and looking at, okay, if I were to come into this business, what would I like hit the ground running on immediately to improve, profits and things like that? What are some of like maybe the 2 or 3 most common things, like right when you get a hold of an Amazon business, what are you guys getting to work on right away?
Yeah, it depends on the business, right? We kind of break it down into 6 levers. Without going into too much detail, marketing is one. Some people are very efficient, others are very inefficient. Supply chain's another. Not only the inventory we talked about, but cost of supply chain and how much are you shipping, when are you shipping, how are you shipping, what are the storage costs, are you using a 3PL, are you having too much inventory in Amazon, et cetera. So just increasing margin through supply chain. New product development, right? As I mentioned, we do like SKU concentration, but we are always thinking about how can we use the brand and Fifth Avenue real estate that we've already built or that the seller has built to continue to build on Amazon or even off Amazon. Marketplace expansion, as we talked about, being where the consumer is. So not only, getting to Walmart or IHERB for supplements or Lowe's for construction, but to international Amazon as well is another one that we think about, right? Some products don't lend themselves as well because there's different regulatory environments, but there's so much low-hanging fruit in the US, but in Europe, there's not as many competitors. It's a different ballgame. So if you know how to operate there and can kind of figure out the regulatory environment, there's actually a barrier to entry for US companies. And then the last one is just scalability, right? That goes back to what we talked about before. We have a team behind us. It's not a 1 or 2 person shop. We'll have a brand manager take over and kind of run the day-to-day, but they're supported by the boosted brain. Everything we've learned from our portfolio, having experts in supply chain, marketing, inventory management, everything to kind of, give that additional boost that we're looking to give.
So one last thing, which, which may be a little controversial, but we keep seeing these models pop up. There's some competitors of yours that I won't mention that's, they're doing like billions of dollars in business now. But, one of the things I loved about Amazon, especially starting out early, is that, and especially like you said, they're enabling, the small mom and pop type operations to kind of kick the 9 to 5 to the curb. But, in essence, this is kind of a, getting these brands that are successful and then combining them into a kind of a big conglomerate, right? So by the time it's done, you're Nike, but you're selling 100 different products, right? But you're this big conglomerate. So, is there any chance for these small, if somebody comes to you and you're like, no, we're not going to buy you, but they now have to compete with you, what do you think that's going to look like in the next 2 to 5 years? Do you think only big brands who continue to grow are going to survive, or do you think that there's still going to be room for these small mom and pop shops?
Saving the hard-hitting questions for last. I like it. So I think there will always be space, right? I think Amazon is changing at a tremendous pace. And I kind of say in this industry, a week is a month and a month is a year. And you're seeing that happen on a pretty incredible journey. And it's a very fun place to be. And certainly it's becoming a bit more professionalized. But ultimately, at the end of the day, product speaks, right? So if you have a strong product and you know how to operate, there's going to be room for you, right? So what's going to happen, and Amazon's doing this themselves already, right? What they're trying to do is give the consumer the best experience they can have. So what does that kind of mean? They've spent billions of dollars in the last couple of years trying to take out black hat activity, trying to move towards getting products right there. There's now on the supplement side, they're doing ISO type certifications to make sure that your products are actually what you say they are. So there's going to be room, and it's a focus on product, and it's focus on driving what the consumer wants is the easiest way to say it in summary. We could spend 2 hours on that conversation, but that's the 30-second answer.
I love
Yeah.
that answer. I think it's so important. I mean, because it's so much easier and there's so much more of a focus on e-commerce now than ever before. And many traditionally brick and mortar brands are now, which don't have as strong a brand and don't have as necessarily quality of product, many of them are moving into e-commerce. And it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger the more and more people that enter this space. So that's when it becomes more important that your products are awesome and that you know how to connect with the consumer, and that you care about those things. You care about brand, you care about your products, you care about what the consumer wants. So I love that. I feel like there will always be space for people to build new brands that do those three things. So that's awesome. Great advice.
I think it's a little bit more than that, right? You also need to be able to operate within the Amazon ecosystem and understand, right? If you don't understand how it works, a brand by itself is not enough.
Right.
But if you have that brand and you have that understanding, and shows like this, that they're all over the internet. There's a bunch of people. You don't even have to pay anything, right? You can just watch videos, and I've heard from amazing sellers who are doing not only 7 figures but 8-figure businesses who literally learn how to sell on Amazon through YouTube, and it's incredible, right? And that goes back to the proliferation of what Amazon's done for mom and pops. I don't think that is going to go away. And interestingly, a lot of kind of more traditional brands hate Amazon, right? So that they see Amazon as a competitor rather than seeing them as an ally. That I think will continue to change, but that also gives the mom and pops a little bit more of an opportunity to kind of to be the man on Amazon. Yeah,
love that. So we always ask this question. We ask what it is that is motivating you. So are you listening to podcasts? Are you reading books? What are you into right now? And anything that you want to share with our audience in terms of things that are motivating you as an entrepreneur and business owner?
Yeah. So I head up our M&A team, and my job is to go find new businesses that fit into the Boosted platform, right? And not every business is a great fit for us, and we're not a great fit for every business. But what's incredibly motivating is I spend a majority of my time talking to sellers, hearing stories, understanding how entrepreneurs have gotten to where they are. And there's no one way, there's no perfect way. There's really only the way that works for you. And there's so many different ways to get there. And that to me is super exciting and the best part about my job. I get to learn as much from the sellers as I get to, share with them and bring their business in. And we have SOPs in our network that are started and found from our conversations with sellers, and they've taught us, right? So it's super fun. I'm learning something new every day. And I get to kind of just talk with an amazing group of people who are incredible, successful entrepreneurs, and their stories are inspiring.
It's awesome. That's what we love about doing the podcast, is that we get to meet other people and learn. I'm like forced to stop and learn and grow every week. And that's been an amazing blessing. So Adam, I mean, you've given us so much information in this hour, and we so appreciate you for being here. Please, before we go, just let everybody know if they want to get in contact with you, if they're thinking about selling their business, how do they do that?
Yeah, look, we are always looking to grow, right? We are trying to get pretty aggressive to 100, 200 Amazon businesses plus in the next couple of years. So even if you're not ready to sell your business, we would love to talk. We would love to have a conversation and understand where you are and reservations, what you're thinking about, and maybe get the relationship started for when you are. We're trying to be the acquirer of choice. We look at this as a partnership, and we want to be the buyer that you go to first, because not only are we going to give you good value and we are fair with our value, but also we're going to help with the relationship and help you continue on with your career. And we have a cool announcement coming in the next week that you'll see on the press with regards to that. So as you think about, differentiators in the space, there's a lot of us, but please do reach out. Boostedcommerce.com is our website. There's a form there you can fill out. You can reach out to me directly at adam@boostedcommerce.com, or my M&A team is all together at acquisitions@boostedcommerce.com. Again, even if you're not looking to sell, we would love to hear from you and get the conversation started.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for being here with us. And thanks for everyone who joined us live. You can join us every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Pacific, here at sellerroundtable.com/live. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. We appreciate all of you. Andy and I hear from you all the time, and we just absolutely love providing that value for you. And thank you to our guest, Adam, today. And we'll see you next week.